Okay, well, thanks for everybody coming back. I hope you got enough lunch and enough networking. So the next speaker really needs no introduction because I think everyone knows John Cruden by reputation, if not personally. But it's always an honor to have him here, and specifically what he'll be talking about in response to our request is the role of the courts in what we see in natural resource damages and restoration, and the role of the courts generally on environmental actions. I think you used to say that you could read it all in a weekend, but I think life has changed a little bit, and we have some pending cases now that are of interest. And then the other was what he had termed untold stories from the Deepwater Horizon. We changed that to untold lessons learned, but I kind of like the innuendo of untold stories. It sounds very mysterious. So at any rate, everyone knows that John was the senior leader of the Department of Justice, serving as Assistant Attorney General for Natural Resources and Environment. He supervised some of the largest cases, Exxon Valdez, Love Canal, Bunker Hill. He then became head of the Environmental Law Institute. He now is with a principal with Beveridge and Diamond. And I think after this long a career, I am so happy that you're still engaged with us on these issues. So with no further ado, it is my pleasure to bring John to the podium. We will move to the next segment of the agenda at 1:15 sharp.
Hey, what fun. There's so many of you all that I know, so many of you watching that I know. And so but once again, Barbara's put together a great conference of really big ideas of what we should all be thinking out. Now, my shout out to my former colleagues at Justice, Jeff Talbert, Roger Martella, Jay Pendergrass, all people that I admire and have had the wonderful experience of serving with. All right, so this is a little bit different than the panels you're doing before. I'm going to center on the 15th anniversary of Deepwater Horizon. Now pause for a minute. 15th anniversary. I also teach at George Washington University, and my students remind me I was 10 years old when that happened. But they also say, I remember. It's kind of etched in your brain, 87 days of this well, Deepwater Horizon, erupting every single day. The nation is focused on an accident, not intentional. I led the litigation and the settlement, but I also did Volkswagen. Volkswagen was not an accident. The Dieselgate, that was intended. This was an accident. And that's what I want to talk about. I'm going to set the stage a little bit, kind of refresh your recollection like we do in trial. And then I'm going to go into things that I think of as lessons learned out of that maybe have an application beyond Deepwater Horizon. I'm enormously impacted in this presentation because about 6 weeks ago, I was with Judge Barbier and Judge Susan in New Orleans, and we put on a program to the Restoration Conference, and where we were doing sort of from a litigation standpoint, all the aspects of that. I'm not going to do all the litigation issues, but I want to set the stage for you there with, and then we'll go right into things that I think are worth talking about. All right, here, look at this, a picture. You've seen that 100 times there. That is the rig Deepwater Horizon. That's what it was. It was a rig there. It was about 10 years old, built by South Koreans. It was leased by BP. And then on April the 20th, it explodes. What does that mean, by the way? What really happened there? In well terminology, it was a kick of gas. That's what happened. They were about to leave. They were about to leave that level, and that means the well was productive. There was no question that there was oil in the well, but there's a different process by which they were going to go back and actually claim that oil. So they're about to leave. When they're doing that, they do a submit operation. Halliburton came in How many people have actually seen the movie Deepwater Horizon? It's worth seeing, by the way, because the major figure is trying to show what happens, and they takes a Coke can, and then they, pull syrup down the Coke can, and that was the cementing operation there, and then sticks a whole, straw in that can, and that because it's a Coke can under pressure, and it still screws out of the can. Well, that's what really happened. They tried to cement it. The cement did not hold, and they have a kick of gas. So now traveling up over a mile underneath the surface, it hits it's basically a city. Deepwater Horizon is really a city, and that ignites it. And then it keeps getting fed, right? It keeps getting fed out of the oil because the blowout preventer did not work. A blowout preventer, if it had worked, would have crimped it and stopped it, and it didn't work out there. So that's all part of the case. But I want to remember, it was an accident. BP didn't want this to happen. 11 people died. Countless people were injured out of that out there. So this is something I think when I'm talking to my client corporations, I'm telling them, you got to prepare for this stuff there because it does happen. All right, look at this. This is just a picture of damage. You can do lots of things there, but I like that middle one, which just shows you in red just how far it was into the Gulf of Mexico, impacting 5 different states. There was also, this is April, so you're getting right before tourist time out there, impacts fishing industry, a gigantic impact. I mean, I also, at Justice, did Exxon Valdez, also an oil spill. Exxon Valdez, also significant ecological, but that was Prince William Sound. That's out in the middle of nowhere in Alaska. This is hitting now beaches, it's hitting tourist areas, T-shirt salespeople along the beaches. It's hitting all of that, and that makes it so impactful there. So what happened there? 87 days. Ultimately, they cleaned up. I don't know if those of you remembering all of that. They tried different things to stop the spill. They did things like a top hat that was going to go on top of it, but the pressure underneath the surface is so great that all those other parts of it really did not work there. At Justice, I'll get around to other things we're doing, but one of the things we did, because a lot of this stuff was new to us, we actually hired riggers from Canada, and we had them come in, and they were doing 2 things. They were educating us as to how this worked and the aspects of Deepwater Horizon and the drilling, because it's breathtaking science, mile down, and you're extracting underneath that. But they were also taking a look at what BP was trying to do, and they kept saying, I don't think it'll work out there. And then BP did the backup. The backup was you drill another well a mile down, and then you go, I don't know, half mile horizontally, and then you hit a pipe about that big. And they said, oh yeah, everybody can do that. I mean, the engineering is phenomenal out of all that. And that's what happened. 87 days later, they stopped it. I went out with the Coast Guard to look at the site while it's still going. It's about 40 miles off the coast of Louisiana. It's still burning. It's still burning. They're still jetting. You can see it miles away because it's black on a, sort of a blue ocean, so it's really obvious. And then later came back because we were filming video to present in trial, because here's the 3 trials and we needed evidence there, and you could see so easily the ecological impact which we're doing out of airboats, which I'll show you a picture of later, because the oil did not hit every piece of wetland, but when it did, it killed everything in sight. There were no fish, there was no birds, there was nothing. And then you'll see another patch where the oil missed it. And you see now what life was like on that wetland, very productive there. But the contrast was exceptionally great. This was really the first real use of the Oil Pollution Act. Exxon Valdez brought us. I often say when I'm teaching students, most of environmental law was born of tragedy. Something bad happened, Santa Barbara, Cuyahoga River, Love Canal. True Oil Pollution Act, that's what Exxon Valdez, right? And it creates a cause of action that's both legal and economic there. So these trials that we have there are really impact of both. But it's impact of the Clean Water Act as modified by the Oil Pollution Act. And so the trials are, which I'm not going to cover other than we had a lot of them. We had a lot of trials, a lot of issues associated with all of that until the third trial, which we tried the whole case, but was never ruled on because we settled the case there. We settled it on a federal consent decree. Many parties, look at all the 5 different states involved. They had to sign. The judge required the attorney general and the governor of every state to personally sign. And they required that in 48 hours. And it worked. Turns out when you're in the billions, that tends to galvanize attention there. But also there were 5 federal agencies involved that are also signing the consent decree. Before that, the personal injury cases had been basically resolved before then. Here, though, not only was, shows you here, this is an extract of the press release. So you have what I think of as the federal quintessential cause of action. What would that be? Liability, natural resource damages, and a penalty there. But also at the same time, simultaneously, you have like the local parishes, cities and counties with their economic damages. So Barbara, here's my first untold story there. So I'm on the federal side of all of this. We're negotiating with BP almost daily as to what we're going to do. But parallel to that, there's another team of people that are negotiating with the individual parishes, the individual small towns there. And they came up with a figure. They actually had a whole matrix way of doing that. And then the special masters call to the cities and say, here's what you got, yes or no, that's what it is. And one of them, at least I'm told, heard the number and went, thank you, Jesus, well, we're ready. And most of them did, in fact, settle there. So, all right, with that, you got the primer, you got the basics of all of that. Now I want to kind of think back and think, now, how is this relevant? What do we do? What should we be doing? Because this year alone, think about the various accidents that we have seen. Jay was talking about just Silver Spring, Maryland and the rain there, but think about Guadalupe River. Think about the Boeing air crashes. Think about all the things that have occurred there that were absolutely unintentional, very often by major, well-funded, corporations. So when I'm talking to corporations at this point, I usually show a picture of a fire extinguisher. And then I pause and say, it's a bad time to read the instructions on a fire extinguisher during a fire there. And they all smile and laugh. And I said, I'm trying to make a point there. So, Barbara gave you my background. I am a passionate environmental lawyer, but, huge but, way before then, I was in the military. I graduated from West Point there. So there's things that impact what I'm telling you out of my military experience. So the military actually does things called staff rides all the time there. What's a staff ride? So it used to be on horses, now they walk around. They go to Gettysburg Battlefield or they go to some other battlefield and they map out every single thing that has occurred, including all the things that went wrong on all of that. They play war games all the time. And they say, you've heard it, plans only last like the first day of battle and then everything changes. Well, my point is they are actually quite good at learning from mistakes, and then also planning for the future. I think we could learn a lot from that there. And that's big corporations, small corporations. By the way, I mean, BP had a spill prevention plan. Of course, it didn't work there, but they did have one. And so that is not unimportant. Okay, preparation is number one on the list. Number two is when all these things happen, the first thing that lawyers think about is litigation. And they start thinking right away about litigation. By the way, the first thing I did when Deepwater happened was we sent out 30 letters to every single subcontractor, every single person involved, all the people. There was 3 other people who owned part of Deepwater Horizon saying, by the way, there's going to be a lot of documents. Don't throw any away. Hold on to everything. And we describe documents very broadly there. But you know what? Lawyers are not the first people that you need to think of on the scene there. What you need to think about on the scene is the people that are going to stop the 87 days of oil spreading, or the people who are going to be there analyzing the potential health and human effects of what's going on, train derailments, which we have seen, other sorts of things. The first people on the scene are first responders, and lawyers ought to get out of the way. And also, lawyers are actually pretty crappy in terms of being the spokesperson. We tend to stand up and say, well, we don't have any view of liability, which I'm telling corporations, that is not what you do. What you do is say, this is not the right time to be pointing fingers. This is the right time to clean it up or protect people or stop the discharge. Then we will get to that. And how we will do that, we'll investigate it there and we'll give you the results. But lawyers are not actually the right people. But the first is, and that's what the practice is, and that's what the military was practicing, is not how do I litigate it, how do I stop it, how do I prevent, how do I address health and human hurt and environmental concerns. That's it. But then you start doing. All right, so now I'll turn to other things that public doesn't know in Deepwater Horizon. So even though I told you, we had lawyers at the scene, but they really were not in any kind of control situation, but we were doing things. So the first thing we did was send out a Coast Guard ship to the site and to take virgin samples of oil. First thing, why would we do that? Why would we go out and get virgin samples of oil? This is audience participation time.
Is that because oil naturally leaks from the bottom of the Gulf?
Good step. Just one more indication. I have a lot of experience in this audience. Right, the Gulf of Mexico leaks all the time, and plus there's other sorts of ship, discharges going in all the time, and that's one of the things we learned from Exxon Valdez, is that we needed to be able to do that DNA tracing when you had, dead dolphins or dead turtles or dead birds. Those are evidence, but there has to be a causal relationship between those dead animals and the actual oil that came out of Deepwater. So that was our first step. The second is we brought back in Exxon Valdez people. We brought back the people who did there because why? They had all the evidence protocol. Chain of custody, all right? We think of chain of custody as what you do on a drug bust. It actually is also true when you're doing things like collecting evidence, because there was volunteers everywhere collecting fish, and the fish were actually going to a mortuary and a sampling place, but we had to be able to show that that was the right fish connected to the right DNA sample there. So there was those sorts of things going on. We videotaped the entire coast. Why that? Because remember, in natural resource damages, those of you like my friend Bill and others who are expert in that area know there's a difference between what is the pre-existing status of that resource and then the injured status of that. So you need to establish a baseline. So we were doing all those things at the same time, trying desperately not to get in the way of the cleanup, not getting in the way of things that were done beyond what was going to be important litigation. When actually, just a step aside, when we did the third trial, which was a penalty trial, The on-scene coordinators were actually Coast Guard. They were the people, not EPA, was Coast Guard was there. And so we had the Coast Guard Admiral, a woman on the stand, terrific individual. And she was asked a question which we anticipated, and we knew what her answer would be, and we agreed. The question was, what grade would you give BP for the cleanup? And she said, A. I give them an A there. I don't think that's unimportant there. I don't think that cleanup could have occurred without a pretty good partnership between the Coast Guard, other government entities, and BP. I don't think it could have happened that way. And that's also another lesson, right? The emphasis, you couldn't say we can't do that because eventually we're going to sue them there, which is pretty true there. On the other hand, that's not the first emphasis, right? The first emphasis is cleanup. And they did. They established a great working relationship with them. So the early steps matter under those circumstances as long as we keep our eye on the ball that the most important things are health and human environment. I don't know whether or not, I bet the lawyers in the audience have all heard of multi-district litigation, although I imagine only a few of you have participated, and I think people outside of the government world or lawyer world would go, what's that? What's MDL and why do you care? This might be apocryphal, but I've been told it 2 or 3 times, so I'll repeat it. And that is, I told you Deepwater Horizon's about 40 miles off the coast of Louisiana. And there were, over 30 people injured, 11 people died. And so Coast Guard is going in there and evacuating them, taking them out of the water, getting them back as quickly as they can back to Louisiana and get them hospital help. I'm told that by the time they finished that, the first class actions had already been filed in both Houston and Louisiana there. So that's what MDL is all about. MDL is looking at these big cases where you have multiple filings, multiple districts, even multiple causes of action, personal injury, property damage, economic loss, and they happen so quick. In this case, there are like thousands of potential claimants in this case. And what happens? It's multi-district litigation. Under the federal rules of civil procedure, it allows the parties to go in and try to get those cases combined. Here's what's fascinating. So on the one hand, you say I've combined the case. It's more powerful than that. The first thing they do is say, all right, we're combining it. The second is they pick the place. They pick the venue. And it could have been a lot of different places, right? And then third, how about this? They pick the judge, individually pick the judge there. So it's really powerful there. But it would not have worked had there not been that ability in multi-district litigation. So apart from environment in my world, you see them elsewhere, right? You see a lot of them elsewhere. But I'm focusing narrowly on environmental issues and just how critical it was. But center side, we did the same thing at Volkswagen. Volkswagen, multiple cases, all the people who owned VWs, were victims. Their multi-district litigation did it in San Francisco, and they picked Judge Breyer, by the way, then the brother of the Supreme Court Justice picked him. So anyway, it's absolutely good. And Barbie became the judge. They're experienced, knowledgeable, Fifth Circuit, they loved him all the time there. So obviously there was a reason why they picked it. But here's one that we don't talk about enough of. Again, all the lawyers know, but the rest of you all, in a courtroom, you're seeing a judge and federal district judge goes through Senate, gets confirmed, lifetime appointment. This is a big deal. What you don't see very often beneath that are what we call magistrate judges. These are also federal judges. They haven't gone through Senate confirmation, but they're picked by the judges that are usually very experienced people. Not every case has a magistrate there, but when you get in these big cases, you almost always have a magistrate judge. What does a magistrate judge does? A lot of times, discovery. there. In a case like Deepwater Horizon, very often we talk about how many tracks of deposition during the day, one day, and it's a big deal if you do 2 in one day. We were triple tracking depositions there. That means you have to be on the phone to be able to call somebody and say, answer me right away whether or not this is objectionable or not. And she played that role. Also, there were multiple terabytes of information there. Terabyte of information is like the same as the Sears Tower, multiple terabytes of information. By the way, query, maybe now we would think about AI, but not so much. This is 15 years ago. All right. And then how about special masters? What do they do? Again, something else you probably haven't seen before, but these are people who can handle the administrative process. There was several different special masters. Louis Freeh was pushing settlement, former FBI director. I thought I cornered the market on former FBI directors because in Volkswagen we had Robert Mueller, also former FBI director. Sometimes they forgot that they were former FBI directors, but nonetheless, without question, a hugely significant role that they played there. In military terminology, there is something called unity of command. And that means that you just saw in the recent attack that we did military-wise for Iran, there's like multiple countries working on all of that. Some are fueling the jets en route. They're multiple. But there's this theory in the military that to every one of those battles, there's a unity of command. Somebody is in overall charge of that. We don't have that ability in environmental cases to have just one person, because look at that. Federal government, state governments are involved. And there was multiple corporations in Deepwater, multiple congressional committees. But what you can do is isolate. And so again, those people who know natural resource damages know you have trustee councils. The trustee councils can be extraordinarily important to get people together there. So maybe we can't do it overall, but having pieces of it together where best you can, you're trying to get that unity of command there. When we finished and had our consent decree signed by 5 governors and 5 attorney generals and 5 secretaries there, that was not the end of it. In Deepwater, we did 6 public hearings, every single state in the District of Columbia. I ran the one in the District of Columbia. And what you do is you stand up like a group like you all right now, and it's full of people who all want to talk theirs. So you explain what the case is about a little bit, and then you just sit down, and they come up in 6-minute increments. And as you would imagine, there was a whole bunch of people who thought what you did were terrific, a whole bunch of people who thought you should have done more. More was pretty much, I have a project that you should have funded. And I want to tell you about that there. But the importance of that, first of all, is keeping the public knowledgeable. My experience has been that you can do a lot as long as your public knows what you're doing. You heard some of that from Roger Martella today about that. But also in the case of litigation, the consent decree is lodged, but it's not yet entered. So you go through the public comment process, then you give all the public comments to the judge along with your view of those public comments and whether or not you should change. So the public plays in environmental litigation a critical role, way different than other forms of litigation, is the role of the public, and I think that's the way it should be there. The end result of Deepwater, and it's the end result that we should always be looking for, is how do we make the environment whole? In any of these accidents, I don't care what it is, where it is, at the end of the day, if there's been environmental injury, then how are we using the money? I told you, out of Exxon Valdez come the Oil Pollution Act. Out of Deepwater Horizon came the Restore Act, which said 80% of the penalties will go to the cleanup, and natural resource damages already goes to the cleanup. So here's just examples of what was happening in restoration, because that's how the money was being used, is to do restoration. And because there were trustee councils and other groups, there was a unity of command, if you will, as to how it was being used. One more. This is, yes, you have restoration. Yes, you have a good idea. But, you know, my experience in the government is anything you don't check, you can't be sure of there. And so here is the check and balance of this one there. And that on the right hand are Judge Barbier, Judge Shushan, heads of Louisiana and other state actions. There are airboats. There are airboats going out looking at, in this case, wetland restoration, which is very hard to do, by the way. On the picture on the left is restored land, but it has to be restored land that's going to be wet, right? Because it's a wetland. But if it's too deep, it drowns. If it's too high, it doesn't do wetland. And they were planning it out for 15 and 20 years. 15 and 20 years in the future, we know that this will work. It's still happening now. But my point is, the restoration is extraordinarily important. Somebody has to check on that. Somebody has to look at that. And it's not going to be a lawyer. It's going to be a scientist. It's going to be somebody who knows wetland. 50% of all wetland restoration has failed in the past. So somebody who knows what they're doing is looking at that. Here's my close. When I finished, people ask me all the time, Deepwater, what role did the White House play? And this is Obama administration. And I said, you'd be surprised, but nothing, zero there. We made the decisions and was scientists and all the people part of it. And by the way, there's people involved here and that you're going to hear from later that played a unique role of the government. But when it was done, President Obama called me to his office and said, now I want to hear the story. Tell me what happened, which was sort of exciting. But at the end of it, he said, you go back and tell every single person involved on my behalf just how proud of I am for what you have accomplished. BP has met every single one of their dollar responsibilities. So 20 years, still going on. They have met every single one. And that money is what's being used to restore the Gulf now to where it would have been, but for the polluting event. So that was my thoughts about Deepwater Horizon in a nutshell and my 10 lessons learned. Barbara, back to you.